Sorry if I sound a bit off and tired today. I was up all night last night. I got no sleep, just thinking about the inevitable crash of the modern gaming industry. Nah, I'm just playing. Gaming isn't that important. But I have been thinking about the inevitable crash of the gaming industry lately, and just some new perspectives I've come up with that I just kind of see how I see things playing out in the future, and I just kind of want to talk about it. Let's start with Xbox today. $1,500 Xbox, okay? I want to put this into perspective. I made a wish list of what I would want Xbox to do to get me to fork over $1,500 to buy a new Xbox, full backwards compatibility, first party exclusive games, the list goes on and on. But even if Microsoft ends up making the perfect video game console, it could literally be the greatest video console ever made. And if it's $1,500, I might buy it. You might buy it. But we live in this YouTube gaming bubble that is not the mainstream audience. And there is no way in hell that this thing would sell at $1,500. At that point, why would most people who would spend that much money would probably get a PC at that point, even though the price of PC and the parts and components are going to go up even higher. I mean, when you're in last place, like Xbox, you're in no position to make a premium selling console, right? A premium price console. You have to undercut the competition. You have to sell for a loss. If this thing isn't powerful and cheaper than the Nintendo Switch 2, then it's like there's no it has no fighting chance. I mean, let's look at the Xbox One when that came out at $500. They lost that generation. PlayStation 3 when it came out at $600. They, for the most part, lost the generation. Maybe they technically won by the very end of it, but at the beginning, it wasn't even close for a long time in that generation. And we're talking about $500 and $600 price points right there. We're now looking at $1,000+ for the PlayStation 6, $1,500 for the next Xbox. Xbox at $1,500, no chance. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. That's it. See you in the next one. Nah, okay. We'll keep going. So $1,500 is so far out there that thing is that's not gonna sell enough units. Again, it could be the best console ever made. It's just priced out. Okay, $1,000 PlayStation 6. This is where it gets a little more interesting because I guess in the current market, it's not going to be at the high end. It's going to be in the middle there. But we just had the PlayStation 5 Pro go up to $900. And that's without the disk drive. That's without the stand. That's without tax. It's $900. And they raised the price of that in 2026. And if the PlayStation 6 comes out in 2027 as planned, like hopefully it gets pushed back. But if it does come out holiday 2027 or whatever, I don't see them bumping the price up of the PlayStation 5 Pro and then the PlayStation 6 not being more than the PlayStation 5 Pro, because what are we doing if the PlayStation 6 isn't more powerful than the PlayStation 5 Pro? Like, you need to tell me that the PlayStation 6, they're going to somehow find a way to make it more powerful and engineer the design better to make it cheaper so that way it's less than the PS5 Pro? Would they just stop selling the PS5 Pro at all? Like, if you go to the store or go online, it's like the PlayStation 6 is $800, but the PlayStation 5 Pro is $900. That makes no sense. What are we doing? So the PlayStation, and then if the PlayStation 6 isn't as powerful as the PlayStation 5 Pro, you're telling me that's like, if I want the most powerful console, I gotta buy the PlayStation 5 Pro, not the brand new PlayStation 6. It'd be really confusing. And so, no, absolutely, I believe that the base price of the PlayStation 6 is gonna be higher than PlayStation 5 Pro, which is at $900. I don't see them lowering the price of the PlayStation 5 Pro like for a year, like what they bump the price up for 1 year and then lower it back down just so that way the PS6 could be at the 900 price point. I don't see that happening. And then again, $1,000 just it's like a conservative sounds nice number, but then you have the disc drive, which I think the PlayStation 5 one's like maybe $80. Like they'll probably raise the price of that. $100 for the disc drive. The stand, like where I have my setup, I need a stand. I really can't lay it sideways, so I'm sure they're gonna do some kind of stand. In the current one's $30. They'll probably raise the price on that. That's probably $50 now. We're looking at $1,150 plus tax on all these items. We're probably getting into $1,250 at this point. Not that much better than the next Xbox. And again, at that point, people historically, gamers have struggled. It's like, why do I need a $500 console? Why do I need a $600 console? I will go with the cheaper option. And again, I'm someone who could afford the PlayStation 5 Pro, but I chose not to get one because I'm like, I'm not going to spend $800 at the time of, the launch. Maybe it was $700. I'm not going to spend that money for better graphics when like the PlayStation 6 is probably going to come out, in a few years. Like, I could wait 4 years for the PlayStation 6, and that $800 that would go towards PS5 Pro, I will just use to the next console and get an even bigger upgrade from the base PS5 to the base PlayStation 6. But again, this is just me. This is how I feel. I'm someone who is positioned to be marketed and can afford this, but I have to realize and come to terms that's like not everybody is like that, right? And so I can make videos and talk about what I would do to buy a $1,500 Xbox, what I would do to buy $1,000 PlayStation 6, or what they would have to do to get me to buy that $1,000 Steam machine, how I could justify it for me. But at the same time, when you look at the bubble, or the YouTube gaming bubble, and how small it is, like, we can all agree that $1,000 PlayStation 6 is worth it. But there's the mainstream audience, the people who loved Pokopia, where everybody here in the bubble said Pokopia was going to be trash and it was going to be slop and it was going to crash the Nintendo Switch 2. Turns out to be a breakout success because, the mainstream is a lot different than us. And I don't think the mainstream is going to want to spend this kind of money on video game consoles. And so what does that mean for Sony and the PlayStation 6? I don't think there's a chance at $1,000 that the PlayStation 6 is going to sell as much as the PlayStation 4 or the PlayStation 5. We are going to be in a recession. It's just not going to grow that much. And this got me thinking about modern game development in general. So I feel like there's been a lot of talent lost in the modern gaming industry, whereas hardware's got more powerful, like the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. Gaming PCs becoming more popular and the graphics cards getting better. I feel like developers have been getting lazier and lazier, whether it be like, developers or just like loss of talent, or if it's just the game's getting so big and the management, they don't give the developers time to optimize because they're too busy having to make all these side quests and these giant open worlds and all that. I feel like that you basically need these powerful consoles to brute force these games to work well. In the past generation, you had like the PlayStation 4 version not being good, the Nintendo Switch version not being good, running at 30 frames per second. A recent example is that I like to look at is Yooka-Laylee Replayly. It's this like basically a Nintendo platformer. It's a 3D platformer. It's like a spiritual successor to Banjo-Kazooie. And I had it pre-ordered on the Nintendo Switch 2 version because it was an early not game key card, physical full-on cart. And this game just looks like it's meant for a Nintendo platform. It's available on like PlayStation 5 and PC, but this looks like a Nintendo game. It looked like it felt at home and appropriate to be on the Nintendo Switch 2, and it was full-on cart, so it's like, I should get that game. But then I heard that it ran like absolute butt, like it could barely hit 30 frames per second. And so I canceled the pre-order because no part of me believes that the Nintendo Switch 2 cannot handle this game at 60 frames per second. At that point, I feel like it's just bad developers, bad talent who just don't know how to optimize a game, that they, put together this game that the PS5 and gaming PCs can brute force to run well. But the Nintendo Switch 2, which is a bit weaker hardware, no doubt about it, can't brute force it. And they can't optimize it. But you're going to tell me that Resident Evil 9 can run on the Switch 2 pretty flawlessly? I'm way farther than this game, and this game is incredible that the Nintendo Switch 2 can handle this game as well as it does. And I think this is because Capcom are talented developers, and I feel like that they use their remakes to develop systems and optimize games. Like, for example, like Resident Evil 2 remake, I think that was like, the first like remake of the Resident Evil series. They made zombie AI and like the items and like the map and the engine and all that. And then Resident Evil 3 remake, okay, we're going to remake another game, but let's take all that stuff and optimize it a bit more. And, as they make new games and more remakes, like, the Resident Evil 4 remake, they have the action system developed. All that led up to this game being able to run on Nintendo Switch 2 because the systems are developed and they've been optimized over time. And so you're telling me that this game can run great on Nintendo Switch 2, but not Yooka-Laylee Replayly. It makes no sense. And so if AAA game development is relying on brute forcing games, and at the same time these games are so big and the budgets are so high that they need to sell millions and millions and millions of copies, when it gets to the point where a game is PlayStation 6 only and the next Xbox and high-end PC, and they need to sell millions and millions of copies, and this game only runs well on those consoles, but those consoles like the PlayStation 6 hasn't sold as much as the PS4, hasn't sold as much as the PS5, and never will because of that high price tag. I don't think these companies are going to be able to sell as much copies of these games because consumers don't have the hardware to run that game. And so unless those companies can make the game run well and optimize on Nintendo Switch 2, probably the PlayStation 5 still, PCs with lower end older graphics cards because people are no longer upgrading, they're still running their build from 10 years ago. If developers aren't talented enough to be able to support high end PlayStation 6 and also the lower end consoles, the weaker consoles, these studios are going to get shut down. They're not going to sell enough copies to make up the losses of these high end development projects. Studios already cannot sell enough units of games, and in the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X generation, a game can sell millions of copies, be considered a success like Hi-Fi Rush, but the studio still gets shut down because not enough. And so ultimately, the way I see this playing out is if the PlayStation 6 and the next Xbox and, higher end PCs just aren't selling enough, if these developers this is going to be a huge moment that weeds out talented and non-talented developers. If a developer cannot make a good running game on the older hardware that people have, or just weaker consoles like Nintendo Switch 2 being the current cheapest console, but then also like the extended cross-generational period of the PlayStation 5. If these companies can't make a game that is new and can run on PS6 and these older platforms, I think they're just going to get shut down and they're going to drop like flies, and we're going to have just a recession of the modern gaming industry, shrinking down in terms of developers and the amount of games that are being offered, and we're going to just be left with companies like Capcom who are doing great work. And Capcom makes great games, but there's going to be a lot of studios. I see like Bandai Namco, they can't make a game right now that's on Nintendo Switch 2. Their ports are lazy. And like Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, why can that not play on the Nintendo Switch 2, right? Like that's totally an optimization problem on the game development side. And I don't know why so many games don't come out on PS4 anymore. In this digital age with these digital stores, that's kind of a head scratcher for me. If the Nintendo Switch 2 is as powerful as the PS4, then why is there no PS4 version of Resident Evil 9, right? They already went through the optimizations to make it run on the weaker hardware. You would think they'd be able to run on a PlayStation 4. Oh, maybe they don't want to make discs or something like that. It's like, well, then just release it digital only. I think that's the least inoffensive way of having a digital only game is in this, like the cross-generational period where it's like, if you want the game physical, buy it on PS5 or Nintendo Switch 2 or something. But heck, if you're still on PS4 and you never switched over to PS5, here's the digital only version. You can download that if you want. I think that'd be pretty inoffensive, to be honest. I think that'd be the way to go for a digital only type of game. And so that kind of makes me think that there must be some rule out there where Sony has it where it's like you can't make new PS4 games, or it's very limited on how you do it. Like they want to push the PS5, they want to sell hardware, and I don't see that changing for the PlayStation 6. The way that this generation, the PS5 generation, Sony seems way more like a hardware company than a software company for me, and they're relying on third parties. I mean, they release like 2 first-party games per year, 2 or 3, but they release like a brand new accessory every year. And I think Sony is just real big on hardware sales. And I think maybe they think they're gonna make a lot of money on $1,000 PlayStation 6s, but I just don't see that happening. And so if Sony decides to make it so that way games are only on PlayStation 6, and that cross-generational period of the PS5, let's say halfway through the generation, there's no longer cross-generational games. I still don't see people jumping over from the PS5 that are holding out and just like, the PS5 version's good enough. I'll play Resident Evil 9 on the PS5. I don't need the PS6 version. I don't need to upgrade $1,000 for the PlayStation 6. If Sony does decide like, hey, PS6 only for the brand new games, and then they force other companies like Capcom to make the PlayStation 6 version, it just seems to me that the Nintendo Switch 2, being the cheapest console on the market by a lot, at 500, if the Nintendo Switch 2 gets raised to $500, that's half as much as the PlayStation 6. Theoretically, if it's $1,000, it could be 3 times cheaper than the Xbox. The next Xbox, Project Helix, if that is $1,500, that is significantly cheaper. And if you can still play Resident Evil 9 or any of these games that are on PlayStation 6, but also has the Nintendo Switch 2 or eventually Nintendo Switch 3 version, which again with Resident Evil 9, I'm so impressed with this port. I know if I got the PlayStation 6 or the PlayStation 5 version, it would look better. Like Grace's hair would look so good on the PlayStation 5. But it's the same game design, like it's the same puzzle box. I'm solving the same puzzles, and in the end, it's the same game, and it's the game that matters. And so I think a lot of the mainstream audience are going to be faced with the question: do I buy a $1,000 PlayStation 6 and then an $80 or $70 or $80 game, or do I buy a $500 Nintendo Switch 2 and I could buy $500 worth of games that, in the end, are the same exact game? Like the hair, like this is totally fine as long as it's 60 frames per second. Unlike the Yooka-Laylee Replayly example, this is great. And again, the difference between this and the Yooka-Laylee Replayly is developer talent, right? It's just optimization. Like, yeah, Nintendo Switch 2 is weaker, but it still can do 4K 60 frames per second. By all means, if the developers are able to design a game around that, like how they used to have to develop around like the PS1 and the N64 days and PlayStation 2, they have to work for it. And the days of brute forcing, it's like you want to make a big game, this big AAA game, and make it lazily that you rely on hardware to brute force it. Cool, you could do that. It could be PlayStation 6 only, but the market for that is going to be way smaller. And if you're spending millions and millions and millions of dollars, as we know how high these budgets can go, is there even going to be a chance to recoup it? Again, in the current modern era, you have guys like Xbox who have to put their games on more platforms just to make sales. Sony tried to do it. They put games on PC. They have a couple games on Nintendo Switch, of all things, to sell more units. And whether or not like some of those are cross deals, like if like Lego's the one who made them do it, or I'm pretty sure at the Major League Baseball they required MLB The Show to be sold on multiple platforms. But whether it's those deals that require them to put them on other platforms, some of their other IP like Hot Shot Golf, I think they just license that out and they get money from those sales. But it's a PlayStation game on other platforms, right? They need these other platforms to sell more units because they don't think they can sell more units themselves. And so, again, Sony's going to be in a really weird spot. Do they support the PS5 essentially indefinitely for that cross-generational period? Or do they cut it off halfway like they're doing with the PS4 to PS5 to try to sell more PlayStation 6s? But then that puts the consumer in the position, do I spend $1,000+ for the PlayStation 6? Or is it the games that are more important? And here's a Nintendo Switch 2 that can play most of these games, especially at that point. By the time the PlayStation 6 comes out, I do think developers will figure out the Nintendo Switch 2 more and how to do it. I do think a lot of the bad games and ports at the launch of it, the game key cards, the bad ports, a lot of it was like, hey, we got to get there day one. Games that sell on launch day are going to sell more copies than any other time. So kind of a bum rush to get there. Who cares if it's not optimized? Get it out there, get it on store shelves. We want to be there for Nintendo Switch 2's first Christmas. Just get the sales. Who cares about the good game? Just get it out there. But that's not going to last forever, right? That's just launch hype. And for 8 years, the Nintendo Switch 2, I'm sure we're going to get way more games like, Resident Evil 9 that perform well on the Nintendo Switch 2. And I think a lot of mainstream consumers are going to be like, again, why would I spend $1,000+ on PlayStation 6 when I can play the exact same games on Nintendo Switch 2? Albeit the hair doesn't look as good, but it's half the cost and I can get more games. And at the end of the day, I just want to play games. And that's with the Nintendo Switch 2, assuming that goes bumped up to $500. Remember, $500 did not fly for Xbox One. $600 did not fly for the PS3. All of a sudden, it's going to fly for these other consoles. Again, it might fly for me. I'm fortunate to be in this position. It's going to fly for a lot of other YouTube influencers who can buy a PlayStation 6 and do a tax write-off. It's going to fly for a lot of the hardcore PlayStation fans and gamers in this YouTube bubble. But outside of this YouTube bubble, which is a majority, I don't think it's going to fly. And so, yeah, even if I get the PlayStation 6 and I buy PlayStation 6 games, I fully expect more studios getting shut down simply because not many people are in my position or in my mindset. I mean, $1,000 for a PlayStation 6. The people, I feel like the biggest gaming audience has always been considered like teenagers, right? But these teenagers can't afford $1,000 consoles. And even from my perspective, getting a kid $1,000 console, that seems like a lot. Like if I was to get my kids a big gift, even a $500 PS5, that seems like this is a big gift. I don't want you to be too spoiled or anything like that. $1,000 for that, that's crazy. And so then you get to people who can actually afford $1,000 PS6, but they don't have time after work, a long day of work, and it's just kind of easier to maybe watch TV. I make time to game every day, or I try to, 15, 30, 45 minutes, but that's because of how much I like video games, and not everybody who can afford $1,000 PlayStation 6 values video games that much, and they would much rather just watch TV. They would rather spend $1,500 on a really nice TV and stream shows and watch TV and movies, and that's cool. That makes a lot of sense. So I think that market just get smaller and smaller. And even for the hardcore gamers, right? You have the PlayStation fans who would buy a PlayStation 6. We're in this K-shaped economy, right? They're just simply gonna get priced out. Maybe they want the PlayStation 6, so maybe they just don't migrate off the PS5. Maybe they're just gamers who like games and they would want a PlayStation 6, but they're just priced out. Maybe they move down to the Nintendo Switch 2. Even the Nintendo Switch 2, I'm not saying that's going to grow Nintendo by any means, that they're just going to get all these people coming from the Xbox, high-end PC, PlayStation 6. Here's the cheaper option. That's going to grow the Nintendo Switch 2. $500 is still a lot of money. Who are we kidding? It's $450. That's a lot of money. There's people who are priced out of the Nintendo Switch 2 already. So I don't think it's going to necessarily going to grow Nintendo necessarily. Because if people do come down from PlayStation 6 and decide to get a Nintendo Switch 2 instead because they just want to play games, there's going to be people who just can't who can't get the Nintendo Switch 2 either, and they are stuck on the Nintendo Switch 1 or the PS4 or the PS5. They're just priced out. But with the teenager example, if you're going to get someone a console, I mean, Nintendo Switch 2 being the cheapest console, they're in a very powerful position. And I think it's going to sell the most units, especially compared to the PlayStation 6 or the next Xbox, just simply because of price point. And then when the audience is bigger, and if the Nintendo Switch 2 becomes a bigger market than the PlayStation 6, again, this is just simply price point at this point, because it's just so significantly cheaper. There's more Nintendo Switch 2s out there in the wild than PlayStation 6s, then the companies are incentivized to optimize for the Nintendo Switch 2. And if all games are optimized to run great on the Nintendo Switch 2, and we no longer have this problem of, wow, the Nintendo Switch 2 version, the port is horrible, because if these companies want to stay afloat, they need to sell so many units, and they cannot sacrifice the Nintendo Switch 2's audience. Because they can't rely solely on the PlayStation 6's audience and brute forcing a badly optimized game because there's just not enough people on PlayStation 6 because of the price point to support that. So at that point, it's like the Nintendo Switch 2 versions of these games are only going to be considered better and better and better, and you're really only going to see a graphic fidelity difference between the Nintendo Switch 2 version and the PlayStation 6 version or the high-end PC version. And as long as like the frame rates are, 60 frames per second and good on the Nintendo Switch 2, the graphics fidelity difference, I am having I by no means think if I played the PlayStation 5 version of this game, I would enjoy it any more than I am the Nintendo Switch 2 version. And that tells me, that says so much to me, where it's like, yeah, I can see the graphic fidelity where like there might be some graphical issues or it doesn't look as good as if I play on the PlayStation 6, but it's the same game. It's the same win condition, the same game design, the same items, the same skill trees, I would like the game just as much, and I like this version of the game invokes those feelings that I would have if I was playing the PlayStation 5 version. And so then if we're getting into PlayStation 6 versus Nintendo Switch 2 version, it's like if the game still runs just as good as Nintendo Switch 2, most mainstream people can buy the Nintendo Switch 2 and buy more games. And that's what it comes down to, are the games at the end of the day. And then halfway through the PlayStation 6, we're going to have the Nintendo Switch 3, which is just going to be even more powerful, which just gets you closer to the PlayStation 6 level of graphics anyway. We'll see what the price point of that is anyway, but I mean, that's all like all of this has been just like in the, confinements of modern gaming. I haven't talked too much about PC because like, yeah, people can say just buy a PC, but like look at something like even like Borderlands 4, like even the PC version couldn't run, like even with the best settings and like the best rig you could get. What people are going to be spending $5,000 on a PC? Like the cost of RAM is just as much as a PS5 right now. I think even like PC gaming is going to be considered a luxury, even more of a luxury than the consoles. And I don't know, I guess like you can still buy the indie games where it's like that could go on a PlayStation 4. They just go on Steam. So there'll be a lot of lower level games on PC that you could play. But in terms of modern games, the new AAA games, to be able to play these games, like your build from 10 years ago isn't going to cut it. And with the price of everything going up, to upgrade your build, it's going to probably be even more than these consoles. I don't think the days of you can build a better PC for cheaper, I think those days are going to be long gone, if they're not gone already. Again, RAM is like one of 11 components to building a gaming PC. And if that alone is more than the PS5 like console itself, that's ridiculous. Yeah, I do see this also leading into just like in general, like a big rush into retro gaming. Because at the end of the day, like with the Nintendo Switch 2, again, this isn't me. I haven't been trying to fanboy Nintendo in this video. It is going to be just the cheapest console on the market, by twice or three times as much. And just that alone is just going to be super powerful. And with these price points of the PlayStation 6 and the next Xbox, I think people are going to really ask themselves, what is most important to them when it comes to games? Like, why am I buying a video game console? And I feel like as those price ceilings go higher and higher, the answer becomes, I just want to play a game. I just want interactive entertainment. I just want to have fun. I want to enjoy these stories and I just want to play a video game. And so again, just like the Switch 2 being the cheapest option, and then people realizing they just want to play games, and that's what that offers, is you can play games. That's just going to help people consider that an option where they haven't, because they wanted the high and the best graphics of everything else. But even then, it's like when you answer that question for yourself, that all you want to do is just play games, well, then retro gaming opens up and you just have generations and generations of games. Like, okay, a PlayStation fan can't afford a PlayStation 6. They're not just going to jump down to the Nintendo Switch 2. Like, they have 5 generations of PlayStation play, PS1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then PSP. They could just stick there for the rest of their life if they wanted to. There are so many games there. I feel like it's going to be a gold rush and a huge resurgence and golden age of retro gaming as people realize it's the games that are most important. And then that mindset, I do think, makes the Nintendo Switch 2 seem better. And if someone wants something like just modern on the market, it's just that price point so much cheaper. And I don't know. I think that is kind of where it's going to go. And as more gamers are just buying retro games, that is less money going into modern games, whether it be the first party studios or, the third party studios making software. And again, if that's just gonna be less money flowing into people like Capcom and stuff like that, and so that's just gonna lead to more studio closures as the money in the gaming market isn't flowing to new stuff. It's all going on the secondhand market, and so yeah, with that perspective and all the studios closing over the years, like I do, and just watching the studios close and the talent getting worse and worse. I feel like we've already been in that recession, probably ever since the Xbox One came out, to be quite honest. But definitely during the PlayStation 5 generation, it has all just been recession, 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 and I think it's going to last another generation with the PlayStation 6. I think I think GTA 6 is going to be a big moment when that game comes out, especially depending on the price point. If it's $80 or $100, that could have a big effect of people questioning the importance of video games, and especially if it doesn't live up to the hype. But I really feel like the PlayStation 6 is going to be another really big moment. If that's $1,000, I think that's going to be a huge moment, and just it's not going to be overnight. It's going to be slowly throughout the generation, but yeah, I don't see the sales of that being nearly what it needs to be, especially for these third party studios to be able to sell enough games. And I've been using consoles as the baseline because I think PCs are only going to be more expensive than the consoles, right? If this Xbox is going to be $1,500 because it's basically just a PC hybrid, well, then PCs are going to be $1,500 plus. And again, the mainstream people, like, they're not going to be getting into like PC gaming or anything like that. Like, most people do all their stuff on their internet on their phones anyway. I bet so many people don't even have desktop PCs anymore. And most of the gamers who have gaming PCs, they probably had their parents pay for it. They're probably teenagers and their parents bought them their gaming PCs. So when they get into the real world and have to start working, and then they realize how much a gaming PC actually costs, they're probably not going to upgrade their PC. Like, again, I don't upgrade mine for at least 10 years, and I have one that needs to be upgraded, but I don't want to do that. I'll just stay on this one, this pre-built, because it's like so expensive right now, and yeah, who has the money for that? So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. How do you think the future of the gaming industry is going to play out? This collapse, this recession. Do you agree with anything I'm saying, or do you disagree? Like, I want to hear. I want to hear some disagreements. What do you think? And yeah, like and subscribe. See you in the next video. Later.